At 71, Harold Jenkins never imagined he'd be having deep conversations about something so private. But one morning over coffee with his longtime friend, Walter McKinley, the topic unexpectedly came up. It started as a chuckle over a magazine article, but quickly turned into something far more meaningful. "You ever think about how no one talks to us about this stuff anymore?" Walter asked, swirling his spoon through his black coffee. "Like, the stuff that still matters. Stuff like intimacy, pleasure, even, self-pleasure." Harold looked over his glasses at Walter, then leaned back with a sigh. "You mean masturbation?" Walter chuckled. "Exactly. When we were young, it was taboo. Then we got married, had families, careers. And now, we're alone. Our bodies have changed, and no one tells us if it's okay, or if it's even normal anymore." What followed was a journey neither of them expected, through memory, medical facts, psychological well-being, and above all, self-acceptance. Their conversations opened a door to a subject often buried under embarrassment or generational silence. But for Harold and Walter, it turned out to be a lifeline. Harold had been widowed for 5 years. His wife, Dorothy, had passed after a long battle with cancer. Walter, divorced for over a decade, had tried dating apps for seniors, but found the digital world disorienting. Both men shared something many elderly folks face: solitude and the quiet longing for connection, emotional and physical. It was during one of Harold's routine checkups that he finally spoke up to his doctor. Dr. Linda Brooks, a compassionate and sharp 45-year-old woman, had always encouraged him to talk openly. "Doc," Harold said one day, shifting uncomfortably in his chair, "I have a question, and I hope it doesn't sound too strange." Dr. Brooks smiled. "I've heard a lot over the years. Ask away." Harold hesitated, then asked, "Is it normal for someone my age to still have those urges? To take care of things myself sometimes?" There was a pause, then a warm reassurance. "Harold," she said, "not only is it normal, it's healthy. Self-pleasure, or masturbation, is a completely natural part of being human, and that doesn't expire with age. In fact, research shows it can help reduce stress, improve sleep, boost self-esteem, and even improve circulation." Harold blinked. "Really? At my age?" "Yes," Dr. Brooks said firmly. "It helps with mood regulation, and for some men and women, it helps maintain pelvic floor function and bladder control. For men, regular stimulation can also help manage prostate health. There's nothing shameful about it, especially if it brings you peace and comfort." This moment shifted something in Harold. He had grown up in a conservative town where these topics were never discussed openly. Even as an adult, he carried a burden of quiet guilt around the subject. But now, hearing medical affirmation from someone he trusted, Harold felt free for the first time in years. He shared all this with Walter during their next walk in the park. Walter, surprised but intrigued, opened up in turn. "I read once that older women still feel desire, too," he said. "And some feel even more in tune with their bodies later in life than they did in their 20s. But society paints us as dried up, invisible." They both laughed, but behind the humor was truth. Many older adults are led to believe that sexuality has an expiration date, but it doesn't. Later that week, Harold found an online support group for seniors discussing sexuality, aging, and self-acceptance. He hesitated before joining, but eventually logged in. The stories shared there, by men and women in their 60s, 70s, even 80s, were heartwarming and eye-opening. There was Clara from Arizona, 68, who after her divorce began rediscovering her body in a way she never had before. "I grew up thinking pleasure was only for men," she typed. "But after menopause, I started exploring and realized how beautiful my body still is. I have more confidence now than ever." There was Robert, 75, a retired teacher who said that after his wife passed, he thought he would never feel anything again. But he discovered that intimacy with himself brought not just physical relief, but emotional healing. "It reminded me that I'm still alive," he wrote. Harold began attending weekly Zoom chats, even contributing his own thoughts. "It's not just about sex," he said in one call. "It's about identity, comfort, dignity. It's about remembering that you still deserve joy." One evening, Harold decided to host a community talk at the local senior center. He titled it Mind, Body, and the Golden Years. Let's Talk Intimacy. Walter helped him organize it, and Dr. Brooks volunteered to speak. At first, only a handful showed up, but curiosity brought more. And soon the room filled with quiet nods, emotional confessions, and important questions. They talked about how aging impacts hormones, mobility, energy, and how it doesn't erase the desire for pleasure, touch, or love. One woman named Martha stood up and said, "I've lived alone for 20 years. I thought it was wrong to still want to feel something. But after tonight, I realize I'm not broken. I'm just human." The applause that followed brought tears to Harold's eyes. What started as a hesitant question over coffee had sparked something meaningful. In the months that followed, Harold continued his research. He learned that the stigma around older adult sexuality was rooted in decades of misinformation and cultural silence. Medical journals pointed out that regular sexual activity, whether with a partner or solo, had benefits beyond pleasure. It helped fight depression, kept the brain sharp through the release of endorphins, and maintained a positive self-image. He also learned about myths like the false idea that older people lose all libido, or that self-pleasure is linked to loneliness or weakness. In truth, many seniors find personal intimacy empowering and emotionally stabilizing. Harold started a newsletter called Still Alive Inside that featured stories, medical insights, and expert opinions. It was modest, but readers began to write in. Some thanked him for giving them permission to embrace what they'd been taught to hide. Others asked him to cover topics like dating later in life, body image after menopause, or communication with adult children about privacy and independence. One email that stuck with him came from a man named George, 82, who wrote, "I thought I had to die quietly, but you reminded me that I can live fully until the end." Harold replied, "You're not alone, and you're not done living." He and Walter became known around their community not just for their frankness, but for their kindness. They never made fun or pushed boundaries, only encouraged people to respect themselves, no matter their age. During one of their final newsletters of the year, they posted a quote from Dr. Brooks, "Aging is not the end of desire. It's the beginning of a new relationship with yourself. And every relationship deserves tenderness." The truth about masturbation in old age, as Harold and Walter discovered, wasn't shocking in the way people might assume. The real shock was how little society acknowledged it, how many elders sat in silence, believing something was wrong with them. But they learned it wasn't shameful. It wasn't dirty. It was a part of being whole. Now, whenever someone nervously approached Harold with a sheepish grin and a hesitant question, he smiled gently and said, "You're not alone. And you're not too old to feel."